3 months missing. A Sentinel trilogy story by Bullock, a Starborne Studios production. Barbara Matthews hadn't slept through the night since September. She'd tried everything: warm milk, herbal tea, the sleeping pills her doctor prescribed that made her feel like she was walking through chest-deep water. Nothing worked. Every night around 2 in the morning, she'd wake with a start, heart loud in the dark, reaching for her phone to check for messages that never came. 3 months. 92 days since Bron had called to say he was going camping. 92 days since she'd heard his voice, heard him say, "Love you, Mom," the way he always did at the end of their conversations. Casual, almost embarrassed, but always there. He'd never once missed it. Not since he was 17 and had started saying it without being asked. 92 days of nothing. She sat at the kitchen table now, a cold cup of coffee in front of her, watching the December light push through the curtains. The house felt wrong in a way it hadn't even after Frank left. Frank's absence had been a different kind of wound, sharp and clean, the kind you could name and eventually learn to carry. This was different. This was waiting, not knowing. The specific cruelty of a silence that might mean anything. Her phone buzzed. "Derek, call me when you're up. Found something." Barbara dialed before she could think. "Derek, what is it?" "Did you find—" "Mom, breathe." Her older son's voice was steady, the way it always was in a crisis. He'd gotten that from his father. The ability to go still when everything else was falling apart. "I didn't find Bron, but I found something. I'm coming over." "What kind of something?" A pause, the careful kind. "Something that doesn't make sense." 30 minutes. Derek looked terrible. He stood on her porch with dark circles under his eyes and a beard that had gone past deliberate into neglect, holding a paper bag like it contained something fragile or dangerous. Possibly both. "When's the last time you slept?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. "I could ask you the same thing." They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd fed them 1,000 dinners, where Bron and Derek had done homework and argued and grown up, where Frank had read the paper every morning until the morning he didn't come home. Barbara made fresh coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. "You went back to the site," she said. Not a question. Derek set the bag on the table but didn't open it. "I used my contacts, got access to places I wasn't supposed to be." He'd been an engineer for 10 years, the analytical kind, the kind who pulled systems apart to understand how they worked. He knew how to find things that didn't want to be found. The official report says his truck was abandoned on a Forest Service road. Keys in the ignition, no signs of struggle. They classified it as voluntary disappearance. "Bron wouldn't." "I know." Derek rubbed his eyes. "So I went up there, and I found this." He reached into the bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth, set it on the table between them, unwrapped it slowly. Barbara stared. A fragment of metal, curved like a piece of something larger, no bigger than a silver dollar. But the surface was wrong. It caught the kitchen light and seemed to move, colors rippling across it that she had no names for. Not iridescent, not rainbow. Something else entirely. Something that made her eyes want to slide away from it, the way they slid away from a magic eye image that hadn't resolved yet. The soil at the site was fused, Derek said quietly. Turned to glass from heat. I found this in the dirt around the edge. Barbara reached out slowly, drawn to it despite the part of her that said don't. It was warm under her fingers, warmer than the room, warmer than her hand. And there was something else. A vibration so faint it was barely there at all. A hum that traveled up through her fingertips and settled somewhere behind her eyes like a word she almost recognized. She pulled her hand back. "What is it?" "I don't know." Derek's voice was hollow. "I took it to 3 labs. The first said the molecular structure doesn't match any known element, called it a fabrication, sent me away. The second accused me of a hoax. The third kept it for 12 hours and then called to say their equipment kept failing every time they tried to run a test. They gave it back and asked me not to contact them again." Barbara looked at the fragment. The colors shifted slowly in the kitchen light. "You think it's connected to Bron," she said. "I think something came down in those woods. Something that left a crater and fused the soil, and left this behind. And I think Bron was there when it happened." Derek slid the wrapped fragment across the table toward her. "Keep it. It's the only physical proof that any of this is real." Barbara picked it up. Even through the cloth, she could feel the warmth, the impossible hum. "He's alive," she said. Derek looked at her. "Mom, I know how it sounds. I don't care how it sounds." She set the fragment down carefully on the table between them. "I know my son. I have known him for 35 years, and I am telling you that he is alive, and he is somewhere, and we are going to find him." Derek was quiet for a long moment, just tired, worn to the foundation of himself by months of searching and finding nothing but questions. "The people who took over the scene," he finally said, "they're not just investigating. They're watching. They sealed the area, classified the reports, and..." He paused. "They're watching us, Mom." "Watching who?" He met her eyes. "Us." She noticed the car 3 days later. Gray sedan, end of the street. Present in the morning when she opened her curtains. Still there when she closed them at night. The driver, a man in a dark jacket, never left. Never appeared to do anything but watch. Next day, different car, different driver, same position. Barbara had grown up in Montana. She had ranched with her father and hunted with her husband, and raised 2 sons in a county where everyone knew everyone. And a strange car parked on a residential street stood out the way a wrong note stood out in a familiar song. She knew surveillance when she saw it. She walked to the end of her driveway on the 4th morning with her coffee mug and looked directly at the current watcher, a woman in her 30s, forgettable face, professional eyes. Barbara held her gaze until the woman looked away first. Then she went inside and called Derek. "They're watching me too," he said before she could speak. "Van outside my apartment. They rotate every 8 hours." "What do they think we're gonna do?" "Find something, maybe. Or they're waiting to see if someone contacts us." "If Bron contacts us," she thought, but didn't say. She hung up and stood at her kitchen window watching the gray sedan and felt something she hadn't expected. Not just fear, not just grief, but something harder and cleaner underneath both of them. They were tapping her phone, watching her house, sending men in suits to tell her to stop looking for her own son. And somewhere in their sealed files and classified reports, they knew something. Nobody deployed this kind of operation to cover up a simple disappearance. Barbara pulled the fragment from her robe pocket and unwrapped it. The colors shifted in the winter light. The warmth pulsed against her palm. Fine. Let them watch. She went to the Chateau Acantha herself without telling Derek. That was important to her. Doing it herself, not because she needed permission or backup, but because this was her son and her choice. And she was tired of being someone things happened to. She had spent 3 months waiting, and grieving, and letting other people decide what was possible. She was done with that. The reporter was young, barely older than Bron, with earnest eyes and a recorder she kept adjusting. Her name was Jenny. She had the look of someone who had expected to spend her career covering county fairs and city council meetings and was still deciding how she felt about something larger arriving on her desk. Barbara laid out everything she had: phone records, bank statements, the police report with its careful language about voluntary disappearance, a photograph of Bron from her birthday dinner last spring, his bank account untouched for 92 days, his credit cards dark, a man who called his mother every week without fail, gone without a word. "And you're certain there's no other explanation?" Jenny asked carefully. "New girlfriend? New start somewhere?" "My son calls me every week," Barbara said. "He has called me every week since he was 19 years old and moved out of this house. He has never missed a call without warning me first." She kept her voice level. "He's not starting a new life somewhere. Something happened to him. I need someone to say that out loud where people can hear it." Jenny looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at the folder. "I'll see what I can do." The article ran 5 days later. Small piece, page 6. Local mother seeks answers in son's disappearance. Barbara bought 10 copies. The public response was silence. No tips, no calls from strangers who'd seen anything. The other response was immediate. Her phone developed a soft click at the start of every call, a tiny delay before the dial tone, faint enough to be ignorable if you weren't paying attention. Barbara had been paying attention to everything for 3 months. She noticed it on the first day. The cars multiplied. 2, then 3, at different points along her street. Then Sergeant Peters called. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Sergeant Peters from the department. We wanted to follow up regarding the article." "Has there been a development?" Barbara asked. "No, ma'am. We wanted to advise you that publicizing missing persons cases can sometimes attract unwanted attention. Scammers, people who take advantage of grieving families." Sergeant Peters. Her voice came out quiet and absolutely flat. "I was born in Teton County. I have lived here my entire life. I know every deputy in this department by name, and I know what follow-up calls from the sheriff's office sound like. This is not that." A pause. "If you have information about my son, I would like to hear it. If you don't, I would like you to stop calling." Silence on the line. "We'd also recommend you refrain from independent investigation," he said finally, "for your own safety." "Thank you for your concern," Barbara said and hung up. She sat at the kitchen table and felt the anger settle into something more useful than anger. Something cold and patient and entirely focused. They were afraid of what she might find. Good. That meant there was something to find. That night she stood at her bedroom window in the dark and looked at the moon. She had looked at that moon her whole life, from her father's ranch, from the porch of this house, from the hospital the night each of her sons was born, and had never once thought of it as a place, a destination. Somewhere something could be. The fragment was warm in her hand. The hum moved up through her fingers the way it always did, settling somewhere behind her eyes. "Where are you?" she asked the moon, asked Bron, asked whatever was listening if anything was. No answer came, but standing there in the dark with the fragment warm in her palm and the watchers in their cars at the end of her street and 92 days of silence behind her, Barbara Matthews felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly. Something more durable than hope. Certainty. Her son was alive. She had no proof beyond a piece of impossible metal and 35 years of knowing him. But she knew. The way she had known when he was 17 and lying about where he'd been. The way she had known the week before. Frank left that he was already gone. She knew things about the people she loved that evidence couldn't explain and didn't need to. Bron was alive. He was somewhere. And she was going to be here. And ready. And watching. When the thread between them pulled taut again. She turned away from the window and went to make coffee. She had work to do. In her pocket, the fragment hummed. In her driveway, the watchers kept their watch. And somewhere impossibly far above the Montana sky, a man named Bron Matthews closed his eyes and saw behind them the kitchen table and the cold coffee and his mother's face, and held onto it the way you held onto the last solid thing. End. 3 Months Missing is a short story set in the world of the Sentinel of Crater Daedalus, Book 1.3 of the Sentinel trilogy. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, it's part of a much bigger universe. 3 novels, more short stories on the way, and a podcast called Everyone Knows, where I break down what's really going on in the world. You can find all of it at brianbullochwriter.com. I'm Brian Bullock, and this is Starborne Studios.